So the US economic war on China continues. This comes from RT. The article is titled US Blacklists Tech Giant Xiaomi and Major Oil Producer CNOOC in Trump's final push against Chinese firms. And if we look through the article, they also mention CNOOC, which is a commercial aircraft manufacturer in China. And what they're trying to do is link all of these companies to the Chinese military. And even if they are somehow linked to the Chinese military, if they do some contract or something for them, or they produce aircraft that are sold and then used for the Chinese military, how is this a problem for the US? What is the Chinese military doing overseas that is a problem for the US? And the answer is nothing. China does nothing overseas with its military, has not invaded any countries. It's not threatening any country with its military. But of course, here in the article, they're talking about the South China Sea. They're saying the military is intimidating its neighbors in the South China Sea and that these companies are somehow involved in that. And of course, if the South China Sea was really an issue, the countries in the region would be going to the US and asking them for help, or approaching international organizations like the UN and asking for help. And yet none of them are doing that. They all opt to bilaterally solve this problem with China directly. And it's not just with China that these countries have disputes with. They have disputes with each other as well. In Southeast Asia, all of these countries have areas that are in dispute, and they have minor clashes, not really armed clashes, but legal clashes. Their coast guards might impound a boat or arrest some fishermen. And it goes on like this, and this happens between all nations all around the globe. What the US has done is they've taken this and they've just amplified it to create a crisis where there is no crisis, or a very, very minor dispute now becomes this huge dispute because of the US media, its ability to amplify these and blow things out of proportion and mislead international audiences. They're able to turn this into a crisis that they then can use as a pretext to do things like these lists where they're blacklisting Chinese companies, hurting their ability to compete internationally. And they even mention how Xiaomi just surpassed Apple. It couldn't be more obvious what the US is actually trying to do here. They cannot compete with China. They are losing economically. Their military, despite being deployed all across the planet, is now worrying about whether they're going to be able to project power into certain regions, because the Chinese military, if you look at their military, how it's set up, the equipment that they have, the way they've organized everything, it's not organized to project power overseas like the United States. Even the Russian military, even though they were able to go into Syria, that was a huge risk that they took. And that was not something easy for them to do. They had to prepare for that. It's not like the US, which brags about its ability to send troops at a moment's notice anywhere around the globe, because they have bases everywhere. They have logistical networks set up everywhere, specifically to project power worldwide at a moment's notice. So this notion that these companies are somehow aiding and abetting the Chinese military in bullying nations around the globe is just ridiculous. At face value, it's ridiculous. And when we see these companies surpassing Western companies, surpassing American companies, companies that have for the longest time been at the very top, we can see why the US is doing this and why they're waging this economic war. It's because they cannot compete on equal terms. They cannot compete fairly with China. So they're doing these dirty tricks. And it gets dirtier and dirtier by the day. And this is RT, but even RT is saying, this is something Trump is doing right as he leaves office. But do we really think that Biden, when he takes office, that any of this is going to change? And the answer is absolutely not. The same corporate interests that are running America and determining US foreign policy around the globe now under Trump were the same interests that did it under Obama and Biden, and will do it under Biden-Harris. So this is going to continue. It's not like Boeing is going to somehow forget that CNOOC is a huge threat to them in the future. CNOOC is a Chinese commercial airlines manufacturer. They make commercial airplanes. And the largest domestic flight market in the world is in China, obviously. And even though it's very hard for CNOOC to sell planes overseas, they're going to be able to sell enough planes inside China alone to eventually reach a level where they can compete against Boeing and Airbus internationally. So this is how they're trying to get ahead of the curve. Instead of just competing, making better airplanes, not covering up safety issues with their planes, Boeing only can think of pressuring the US government into just blacklisting all these companies and trying to ruin them, sabotage them so that they cannot reach that level of success. And a policy like this is not only unsustainable, but in the long run, once China figures out how to get around all of these tactics, then not only will they be outcompeting the US fairly, they will also be very well armed to circumvent and defend themselves against these nasty tricks that the US is doing. So I thought I would point that out. This is going to continue, of course, well into Biden's administration and beyond. So I'm going to be talking about this more often in the future, but I thought I'd just point that out. This is one of the last, things that Trump is doing as he leaves office, but of course this is all continuity of agenda. To my Patreon patrons who make these videos possible on a day-to-day basis, thank you so much for your support, and to everyone everywhere helping in absolutely every way, thank you. I could not do this without my audience, and as always, thank you for watching.